Alright, the crimson blood red shirt is on. Let's talk about battles. Hey guys, how are you doing today? It's P.E. Gilbert, your blogger, writing consultant and the author to the fantasy novella The Sultan's Daughter, and today we shall be discussing 8 tips on how to write the ultimate battle. But before we go any further with today's content, hit that subscribe button. Battles are a key feature of the fantasy, war and action genres. The battlefield is the place where heroes are born, where ambitions clash, fates collide and where brothers fall. Battles should aim to be thrilling and climactic, especially if they take place towards the end of the narrative. But bearing all this in mind, why are some battles better, more pulsating than others? Well, the following 8 tips will answer that question for you, as they will enable you to write exciting one-on-one combat, a pitched battle, a skirmish or an ambush, and I hope they make the writing process a little bit easier for you as well. Tip 1. Decide where the battle will take place. When you, as a writer, plan your story, it is important that you decide where your battle will physically take place in advance. For a battle to make logical sense from a narrative perspective, it must take place in a militarily strategic location that advances the plot, i.e., a specific location for a specific reason. Thus, before you even begin writing your battle, you must ask yourself why the battle is happening in the place that it is. For example, let's look at the major battle that happens in the 3rd installment in the Hobbit trilogy, which takes place at the Lonely Mountain. After Smaug the dragon has been slain, he leaves behind a trove of gold in the aforementioned mountain that is large enough to outdo Scrooge McDuck's vault. The dwarves, led by Thorin Oakenshield, use the Lonely Mountain's natural frontier to barricade themselves inside it, to secure their position and to keep the treasure for themselves. Only Thorin made promises to the elves of Mirkwood and the men of Laketown. He promised them a share of the gold once Smaug had been defeated. So it is no surprise that his former allies marched to the Lonely Mountain to claim their share. And then equally, it is no surprise that the orcs, who want to annihilate all life forms on Middle-earth, attack them from behind. Therefore, the major battle in The Hobbit 3, the Battle of the Five Armies, being positioned at the foot of the Lonely Mountain, makes sense. Our second example for choosing the location of a battle in advance is the Trident River in A Song of Ice and Fire. During Robert's Rebellion, which takes place 15 years before the story begins, Robert Baratheon famously beat Prince Rhaegar Targaryen on the Trident. The battle took place here as 1. The Trident is a river and provides a natural frontier. 2. The Northmen, led by Lord Eddard Stark, were riding south toward King's Landing, the capital of Westeros. 3. Robert and his vassals had ridden north to join up with their northern allies. And 4. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen had mustered royalist forces to the Trident to stop Robert and the Northmen from riding for the capital. Once Robert slew Rhaegar on the Trident, it made logical sense that Robert and his northern allies made their way to the capital. This was because the royalist forces had either surrendered or fled, and there were no longer any natural obstacles stopping them from making their way to King's Landing. Thus, it made sense that the defining battle of Robert's Rebellion took place at this strategically important location. Tip 2. Give the battle sufficient build-up by creating intolerable pressures for the major characters. Of course, the battle is where the action takes place, but the action will invariably only have the emotional heft it deserves if there is sufficient build-up to the battle. Indeed, it could be argued that without sufficient build-up, your battle is going to be boring, uninteresting, and devoid of emotion. There is a massive exception to this, and we'll get to that shortly, but in the meantime, hear me out. Before a battle, it is advisable that you create tension for your major characters. Principally, you can do this by having your major characters face intolerable pressures as they prepare for battle. Your point of view characters should know, or at least fear, that they or their loved ones have a strong chance of dying in the upcoming battle. That is bad enough, yet you can crank up the pressures further in 2 ways. 1. By making the POV character have significantly fewer soldiers than his enemies, and or 2. By making the POV character not trust his allies. An example for when a POV character has had significantly fewer soldiers than his enemies is Jon Snow in the run-up to the Battle of the in Season 6, Episode 9 of Game of Thrones. In the run-up to the battle, the Starks have less than half the number of men of their enemies, the reviled Boltons. Jon Snow, leading the Stark forces to retake Winterfell, agonises with his key advisors in an attempt to come up with a battle strategy that will beat Ramsay on the battlefield. It seems like an impossible task, so it is no surprise that when Sansa Stark suggests finding more men and that Jon should watch out for Ramsay's psychological mind games, Jon reacts angrily. It's not that Jon is an angry person by nature, it's just that the pre-battle pressures are getting to him, and Sansa's suggestions are neither helpful nor exact enough to be of use. An example of a POV character who does not trust her allies is Margaret Beaufort in The Red Queen, which is one of Philippa Gregory's historical fiction novels on the Wars of the Roses. Toward the end of the narrative, the titular Margaret does not know if her husband, Lord Thomas Stanley, will fight for her son, Henry Tudor, or King Richard III in the upcoming Battle of Bosworth. Lord Thomas holds the balance for who is going to win the battle. He is married to Margaret, but his son is King Richard's hostage. Moreover, his war pavilion is stationed halfway between Henry's war camp and Richard's. Thus, he gives no hint either way as to which side he is going to take in the battle. Consequently, Margaret goes back and forth between her son's and her husband's war camps, and she prays in a frantic attempt to ensure that her son will be crowned King Henry VII by the end of the battle. Exception when build-up is not required for emotional heft in battle. In most cases, battles require the sufficient build-up of tension in order for the action to have emotional heft. This is true in most cases, but there are some exceptions. The opening sequence of Saving Private Ryan is a rare instance of how to write an epic battle that has tremendous emotional weight without any build-up. The key reasons for why this battle has such emotional impact on the audience is fourfold. 1. The battle happens right at the start of the film. 2. The film begins at the D-Day landings, so the audience is well versed with regards to the history of events leading up to this moment. 3. The battle involves famous, well-liked actors. And 4. The battle is filmed and choreographed magnificently well, so that viewers feel the raw terror that actual soldiers could have felt as they reclaimed the Normandy beaches in June 1944. If you can write a battle scene like that, then please go ahead and do it. The opening sequence of Saving Private Ryan is a masterpiece, and more battle sequences like that are always welcome. However, you may well need 3 of the above 4 mentioned reasons in order for your battle to have sufficient heft without there being any build-up. However, you may need 3 of the 4 above mentioned reasons to enable your battle to have the same kind of emotional heft as the one of Saving Private Ryan did without sufficient build-up. Indeed, it may not be possible to do this in a fictional fantasy setting. A book that I have recently come across with a terrific battle in it comes from the Raghnall Universe by Shauna Richmond. Her books have an awesome mix of fantasy and Viking, which always makes for great battle sequences. Moreover, I had the privilege of interviewing Shauna recently on my blog. Check out the interview and her books. That's Shauna Richmond, The Raghnall Universe, Shauna Richmond, The Raghnall Universe. I have left links in the description below for both. Tip 3. Have your major characters do something or reveal something unexpected about themselves in the build-up to the battle. As we discussed in the previous point, your major characters must face intolerable pressures in the build-up to the battle. This helps to generate anticipation and excitement for the upcoming battle. At this point then, it is a good idea for you to show how your major characters handle these pressures. In addition, you can add another layer of depth to the emotions running high before battle by having your major characters do something or reveal something unexpected about themselves that adds value to the plot. After all, your major characters know, or should at least fear, that they, or those they care about most, have a strong possibility of dying in the upcoming battle. As a result, their actions or revelations will make the battle that follows infinitely more enjoyable, meaningful, and/or tragic. One of the ways that you can show a different side to your characters before the battle is by making them have sex. Ha! Bet you didn't see that one coming now, did you? Having sex is what King Arthur and Guinevere do before the Battle of Badon Hill in 2004's historical mythical film with the really imaginative title, King Arthur. The night before the battle, Guinevere, played by Keira Knightley, sneaks into King Arthur's tent and has sex with him. This not only satisfies their carnal urges, it also seals an unlikely alliance between the Woad tribe and the Roman legionaries led by Arthur against the hated Saxons. So everybody wins. Another way that you can show a different side to your characters is via a heartfelt revelation. In Game of Thrones Season 8 Episode 5, before Queen Daenerys inexplicably burns King's Landing, Tyrion Lannister betrays her by setting his brother Jaime free. But before Jaime leaves, the two brothers have a heart-to-heart. Tyrion admits that he would not have survived his childhood if not for Jaime.
You were the only one who didn't treat me like a monster.
Consequently, the two brothers embrace and cry, knowing that in all likelihood they will never see one another again. This makes it more upsetting or tragic when Tyrion finds his siblings dead in the next episode, or at least it would have done if the showrunners hadn't ruined the show by then. A third way that you can show how the pre-battle pressures are affecting your major characters is by making them have a breakdown, like what happens in Jarhead. This 2005 film is loosely based on the memoirs of Anthony Swafford during his time as a soldier in Iraq during the First Gulf War. The movie highlights how soldiers handle the stresses of the tedium before battle. Sometimes they simply just have to wait for time to tick by, which in of itself is enough to drive someone mad. The nearer the time for battle comes, the more the pressures of the situation take their toll on Swaff, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. In general, he suffers from mental health issues and paranoia, and before the battle at the end, he has a complete psychotic breakdown. Tip 4. Make the audience feel afraid for the characters involved. The audience needs to care about the characters involved in the fighting, not to mention the ones on the periphery, who will also be affected by the outcome of the battle, especially if the worst case scenario occurs. When the audience cares about your characters, they fear for them, and the key to making your audience fear for your characters is by giving your characters empathy, as we discussed in our videos on how to create the ultimate main and secondary characters as well as the ultimate villain. Once you have made your audience empathise and fear for your protagonists, and possibly even your antagonists, the battle will be so much more gripping and engaging, to the point of setting hearts racing. An example for when we have feared for a main character is Batman when he squares up to Bane in the sewers of Gotham in The Dark Knight Rises. Bane is intimidatingly strong, and he seems to be able to take whatever Batman throws at him. Before long, the cold hand of dread clutches at our insides as we realise that Batman has met his match, that if Batman is not careful, something very, very bad is going to happen to him. An example for when we have feared for secondary characters comes at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring. During the skirmish at Amon Hen, Merry and Pippin successfully distract the onrushing Uruk-hai to enable Frodo, the main character, to slip away. But soon enough, Merry and Pippin become surrounded by their enemies. With no way out, Boromir, another secondary character, rushes into the fray to save them. He holds up the Uruk-hai for as long as he can, blowing his horn frantically in a desperate call for aid. But then he gets shot by arrows, and he, along with the audience, watches helplessly as the Uruk-hai take Merry and Pippin captive to be tormented and tortured. Moreover, an example for when we have been afraid for an antagonist comes in the form of Stannis Baratheon in Season 5, Episode 10 of Game of Thrones, when he sets out to take Winterfell. To all Stannis the Manus lovers out there, hold on for a moment before you type out your vitriol, hear me out. Yes, in this battle, Stannis is against the hated Boltons. Nevertheless, by this point it can be argued that Stannis has become an antagonist. In Season 2, Stannis cheated on his wife with Melisandre, a Red Priestess, to create a shadow demon that murdered his brother Renly. And in Season 5, Episode 9, Stannis burned his daughter alive in the hope of winning favour from R'hllor, the Red God. So for all his self-righteousness and talk of duty, Stannis is arguably as much a villain here as his opposite number Ramsay Bolton, which is quite astonishing really. Still, despite his crimes, viewers fear for Stannis when Ramsay's larger army rides out from Winterfell, encircling him in a cavalry charge, as it spells doom. Tip 5. Choreograph the battle like a ballet. Suffice to say, there is a lot more to writing a battle than merely he slashed through his enemies, she blocked a strike, he charged with a roar, etc. and so on. While there are elements of these in a battle, of course, to just keep typing that your character swings his sword or charges at his enemies, after a very short while, becomes boring and repetitive. Rather, to make your battle captivating and engaging, you must choreograph it like a ballet, down to the finest detail. For example, let's look at one of the best battles in the fantasy genre, the Battle of Helm's Deep, as it highlights the ups and downs of a battle in 3 noteworthy stages. Stage 1. Hope and Control. Before the battle begins, we are given a sense of hope when several hundred elves, led by Haldir, arrive at Helm's Deep to fight alongside Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and the armies of Rohan. This hope increases when the Uruk-hai try, and fail, to scale the fort's walls. At this point, the audience feels that the situation is under control for our protagonists. Stage 2. A turn for the worse. Just as we think that everything is going swimmingly for our heroes, the Uruk-hai do something unexpected that changes the course of the battle in their favour. They place a medieval-style bomb in the drain under the fort's wall, its one weak spot. Then a suicide bomber blows it up. Our eyes widen with horror as a section of the wall explodes, and as we realise that our heroes now face an impossible task to hold back the Uruk-hai, who outnumber them immeasurably. Subsequently, the Uruk-hai swarm into Helm's Deep. Haldir dies, and we get a heightened sense of how terribly the battle is going for our heroes before King Theoden orders everybody to pull back. Soon, the banner of the White Hand of Saruman flies over Helm's Deep, and King Theoden is in despair. Stage 3. Hope returns, followed by victory. When all hope appears lost, the sun rises, and King Theoden rides out in a blaze of glory for the survival of Rohan's soul. Then our heroes see Gandalf and Eomer at the top of a hill. This re-energises them and the audience vicariously, before Gandalf leads the charge downhill. We smile with relief and in the knowledge that victory will belong to the heroes. The formula for the Battle of Helm's Deep. In short, the Battle of Helm's Deep follows a traditional formula whereby there is a tense build-up, and with the initial first phases of the battle going quite well for the heroes. Then a terrible turn of events occur, and the situation worsens as the battle goes on. This is followed by a sense of no hope, before another game-changer event occurs that turns absolute defeat into a stunning victory against all odds. While it is not advisable for you to copy the exact choreography of the Battle of Helm's Deep, as a writer, you must give the audience a similar amount of drama as well as twists and turns. This ensures that the battle is gripping, that the situation is constantly shifting, and that the dangers that the heroes face vary from distantly life-threatening to immediately life-threatening. Tip 6. Make sure there's clarity amidst the chaos. Battles are chaotic, that's their nature, and as a writer you would be wise to make your battles chaotic so that they come across as realistic. In addition, chaos gives the audience a sense of terror, a sense that at any moment their heroes could be slain, shot or blown up. However, chaos in and of itself is not enough. Chaos causes confusion, and confusion means that the audience will have no idea what's going on in your battle. Yes, this confusion probably existed during the thick of any number of medieval battles, as well as during the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II, and during the skirmishes in the jungles of Vietnam, to name but 3 examples off the top of my head. Nevertheless, as we discussed in the previous point, a battle in a narrative must be choreographed like a ballet, so that the audience can feel the ebbs and flows of the battle as they happen. And the best way to ensure that your audience can feel these emotions is by ensuring that there is clarity amidst the chaos. This may sound like an oxymoron, but it's really not. Clarity amidst the chaos also enables your audience to follow a particular protagonist or several protagonists, and it ensures that the sense of terror will be at knife point. Indeed, the clearer the chaos, the more terrifying the battle will be. For example, let's look at the Battle of the During this epic battle, we follow Jon Snow close up. We are right behind him and see only what he sees. Out of nowhere, men attack him, arrows rain down on him, horses run at him, the Bolton forces trap him, his men trample on him, and he struggles to breathe under the crush. Then Jon climbs out of the crush and sees the Knights of the Vale riding to the rescue. Subsequently, he faces Ramsay Bolton with fury, prior to retaking Winterfell for the Starks. At all times during the battle, we know exactly how it is going for Jon. This is due to the clarity amidst the chaos. Indeed, Jon's heightened sense of the chaos around him only adds to the terror that the audience feels for him. Tip 7. Make the battle the right length. This may sound obvious, but it is easier said than done in practice. It is tempting to put in another sword fight, explosion, or wire jump of doom, or all three, with a skyscraper falling on our hero for good measure. The problem is, the more action sequences you put into your fight or battle scenes, the less enjoyable they become. Think of the 40-minute snooze fest that was the crashy, punchy and smashy fight between Superman and General Zod in Man of Steel. Or the hour-long sleepathon in Transformers 3 Dark of the Moon. Or the constant and long action sequences in Sucker Punch. They all put me to sleep, and I am still wondering with Sucker Punch how that happened. You had multiple action sequences of skimpily dressed girls shooting guns and kicking ass, and yet I fell asleep in every single one of those action sequences. How is that possible? The answer to that question is possibly for another day. The question here, though, is that if those battle scenes in those films were long, repetitive and boring, what is the trick to keeping your audience engaged and pumped during a battle? Well, on top of all that we have discussed so far, a key ingredient to writing a brilliant battle is to make it long enough so that the audience feels satisfied, yet short enough so that you leave the audience wanting more. For example, take the second fight scene between Batman and Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. It's under 5 minutes long, yet it feels longer due to all that happens before and after it, and I could certainly watch more of the fight between these two. Similarly, the skirmish at Amon Hen at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring is only 6 or 7 minutes long in the extended edition. It's one of the best skirmishes in the fantasy genre, and again, I could keep watching it. So maybe the trick to writing a brilliant battle is to keep it down to a minimum in length, to under 10 minutes on the screen, or down to relatively few pages in a book. Before we move on to our final tip, I would like to give a shout out to author Khalid Uddin. He has written Rise of the Red Harbinger, which I recently read and very much enjoyed, particularly because it has a terrific climactic battle. I thoroughly recommend Khalid Uddin's book. That's Khalid Uddin, Rise of the Red Harbinger, Khalid Uddin, Rise of the Red Harbinger. Check it out. I have left a link in the description below. Tip 8. Give the battle consequence. Consequence entails that there has been a material difference in the story, i.e. the characters cannot go back to the position that they were in before the event, with the event in this case being a battle. Think of it in a similar vein to what the Prussian general Karl von Clausewitz said about war in relation to politics, only vis-à-vis battles and the plot. Thus, if a skirmish, fight or battle does not add to the plot, you should take it out. A battle, or three, should not be in a story just to take up space, however tempting that may be. No, a battle must serve a purpose. It must have consequence and push the plot forwards. An example of consequence following a battle is the aforementioned Battle of Helm's Deep. Our heroes annihilate their enemies, down to the last Uruk-hai. Indeed, their victory is complete. As a result, the consequence of the battle is that in The Return of the King, the next installment in the Lord of the Rings series, when our heroes find out that Sauron is on the verge of attacking Minas Tirith, Rohan can provide battle-hardened men to aid Gondor, without having to worry about Saruman and the threat of Isengard. A word of caution though, while it is always wonderful to see evil defeated absolutely, it has not only been done time after time, it's also not particularly realistic. To give your battle plausible consequence, it needs to be nuanced, as our next example will show. In the climactic battle of Avengers 2 Age of Ultron, the Avengers caused so much collateral damage to the city of Sokovia, that the United Nations contemplates passing the Sokovia Accords. The Accords cause division within the Avengers because Iron Man wants the Avengers to agree to the Accords, but Captain America is against them. This division forms the plot for the next major Avengers film, Captain America 3: Civil War, where the rival factions fight each other out. This example highlights that the aftermath of a battle, after all the singing, the drinking and the fun is over, can actually be the worst part of the battle, because it can cause splits within a leadership about what to do next. Our third example looks at the consequences of a battle that a protagonist loses. Admittedly, this scenario is rare, but it has happened, and it is fine for you to want your protagonist to lose a battle so long, again, as it advances the plot. In Before They Are Hanged, the second instalment of Joe Abercrombie's The First Law trilogy, the Gurkish Empire seized the city of Dagoska after a lengthy siege. Glokta Dan Sand, our anti-hero, flees the city and returns to Adwa, the capital of the Union, where he fears that his superiors will hang him for losing the city. But to his immense surprise, they welcome him back with a toast. They do this because Glokta held back the Gurkish for so long that his superiors at the Inquisition were able to further the powers of the Inquisition over the people of the capital, thereby ensuring that they can commit more acts of cruelty in the name of law and order. The loss of Dagoska also means that the Gurkish Empire is geographically closer to the Union than they were before. Moreover, they have the perfect launch pad to enable them to invade the Union, which they do in the third instalment, The Last Argument of Kings. And that's all I have for you today, guys. Thank you for watching, and I really hope you have enjoyed this video and that it makes the writing process a little bit easier for you as well. Like, comment and hit that subscribe button, and tell me, what do you think of my tips? What do you think I've missed out to enable you to write a great battle? Moreover, my debut fantasy novella, The Sultan's Daughter, is out. If you enjoy a book that is short, fast-paced and full of suspense, then check it out. Plus, it will enable you to see whether or not I keep to my own tips as well. I have left a link in the description below. Otherwise, join me next time when we'll discuss how to choose the right point of view for your narrative. Until then, keep well. Once again, guys, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it and I hope you've enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button and then you will be the first to receive more awesome content from my channel, and I hope to see you again soon.